So, hi everybody, and thank you for joining. So, very briefly, who I am and why I'm talking about this topic. So, I've been a digital nomad since 2018. So, I started before COVID. Then I started to also talk about digital nomadism, remote work. I founded the Remote Impact, which helps government organization and tourism brands that wants to attract remote workers and digital nomads. And I'm also a board member for AirMap EU, which is a European project that I'm going to talk a little bit about here more. And I'm connected and involved in many nomad international communities. So perhaps for some of us, this AirMap project is new. So basically, it is an European funded project that's running across several countries. And it measures how remote work is changing cities and rural areas, how it influences them. And the aim is to collect data, model future scenarios, and give recommendations for policymakers, entrepreneurs, how to implement and extend remote work and have real impact. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the findings of this project. So for now, the project has been running for 15 months. And the findings highlight the changing in our society, which many of you are obviously aware of. This is housing affordability, right? Mobility shifts, rising inequality. And then we talk a little bit about short-term, medium-term, and long-term recommendations for policies. So for AirMap findings, they divided that in three parts, and what actually can be done to implement more remote work and have more people working remotely, right, on an institutional level. Because we can look at that obviously from two sides. Very often we talk for what is needed from digital nomad perspectives, or from the person that would like to be a digital nomad or remote worker, right? And then it can be seen what actually is needed from society perspective, or from company perspective, or from institutional perspective, right? From a legal perspective. And this is two sides of the same coins. Because as much as so many people would like to be nomads, if we don't have the right infrastructure in place, if we don't have the legal conditions in some places, in some countries, then it simply cannot expand, which is obviously the reason why, despite nomadism has been maybe it exists as a concept perhaps since 2000, so already 2 decades, but it only got maybe more known in the last decade. And most people, they only heard about perhaps digital nomadism since COVID. But even if it's been 5 years already, it made some progress, and it's actually made progress ironically more because of pandemic than it did in an organic way, because people are actually adapting remote work, or companies are allowing for people to work remotely. In COVID, obviously, what happened, there was a big boom. So most people are aware they can work remotely, right? But there is not enough jobs, not enough offers for remote work for the demand that actually we are having. And then also in some places we lack infrastructure. And I think even the bigger challenge is the legal framework, right? Because from the company and country perspective, very often the current law is actually not leaving a space for remote work to be legal and actually be possible. So there are obviously some workarounds, how people actually work remotely and make it work legally. That's probably for another presentation, because we have only 15 minutes today. But we can also have some questions about that. So basically, air map findings, they focused on these 3 stages. Like in short term, it is very important for us to actually measure remote work trends. And air map project is actually perhaps the biggest one that's currently happening in Europe, but also one of the first where institutions and researchers try to actually collect some data, because before that, before that started, we were talking about digital nomadism, we were talking about remote work, but we were a lot of times sharing opinions. Like me personally, I give a lot of talks about remote work, digital nomadism, but we couldn't really back that off with any real data because we didn't have the data, right? Like our data perhaps at best was like maybe nomad list or some random surveys, but they usually don't include enough participants. They sometimes might be subjective, obviously, and then if they are based on subscriptions platforms, then obviously the sample is very personalized. It's just the people that are subscribed to the people, not like the whole population that maybe work remotely or are digital nomads. So this, like, for having any kind of changes or law enforcements or even recommendation, this is absolutely like fundamentals. We must have like real data about like what is actually going on, how many people are working remotely, what is the interest, and where is this all going. So not only what is happening right now, but also what is expected to happen in the next future. We actually expect the remote work trends to rise. There are even predictions by in 10 years we could reach like 1 billion people working remotely. Then again, like working remotely and being a digital nomad, obviously not the same things, because someone can work like 2 months remotely or a few months remotely. They don't necessarily need to travel all the time. They may stay in their home country or just go to some maybe small village and stay there, not necessarily move all the time, but they then would be a remote worker, right? So 1 billion of remote workers, not necessarily digital nomads. For being a digital nomad, many more conditions needs to be met also, like from legal perspective, right? Then another thing that's very important is the mixed or flexible workspaces, or also what they call now like third type of spaces, right? Because we used to have basically home, which is like third space, and then office, right? And now with remote works, there is a lot of like third spaces being created, and these are co-livings, co-workings, but also some hotels are now reforming, and basically you can live and work, and then you can have a gym and spa, and sort of have everything like in the same spaces. There are some ideas to build even like remote work villages, right? So far it doesn't exist in real life, like as of nowadays, in a way that it would be designed for remote workers. But there are obviously towns and villages that are there are a lot of digital nomads, like for instance in Bansko, Bulgaria, or even in Madeira. There are towns where there are already thousands of digital nomads living together, and they actually transform them. But the idea is also that we could actually create a village and build it in such a way that would be designed for remote work or flexible work, because we also have hybrid possibilities, right? Which is right now more people after the COVID work in a hybrid way. They not necessarily are fully remote, but they have some flexibility. So we can also play with that. That can also allow for more people to at least experiment or work partially remote or travel, try to be in different places, try to integrate with local communities. Then on a medium term perspective, because investment is needed, we need a better digital infrastructure. So sometimes when we are talking about like developing destinations, we just talk about what needs to change in general, but we need to think about that, like what can be done actually here in now in this perspective, and then what perhaps needs more time. And sometimes digital infrastructure needs time. Like if we need a better housing, right, that may actually takes a few years. If internet needs to be improved, that's usually not something that happens in a few months. Planning, it sometimes goes in actually in terms of decades, right? But again, like if we are building something new in a city or perhaps even in a smaller town or village, we may already have in mind that we actually urban design is actually evolving because more people have the flexibility. They don't necessarily need to live where they work, or they don't necessarily need to work where they live, right? And then from company perspective, we need more training. A lot of people, despite they would like to work remotely, they don't necessarily have the right skills. Communication skills really need to improve, but also a lot of people need to become more digital savvy. They have to be more independent, more autonomous, because when you work remotely, there is more responsibility on you, not just in terms of doing your work, but also from like social, psychological perspective, from organization. You have to be better problem solver. So there is a lot of things that need to be, I would say, trained on a company level. People obviously can learn that individually, but overall we need better preparation for companies to be also able to make that more functional. And on a long-term perspective, we need obviously policies, right? Like in some countries, like the fact that we now have these digital nomad visas, this is actually move in that direction, but nomad visas are not enough, and a lot of them are not actually working, or they not really manage to attract remote workers. That's again a topic for whole another conversation, but it is necessary. Like the legal part is necessary because a lot of remote workers actually right now don't necessarily even have like the right laws to support them. Like if something happens, we have the problems, right? Because we don't have any assurance, or they not even are allowed to be in certain countries, or there is just like a very big gray line, where and where not, and how not you can work remotely. So if we want more people working remotely long term, this is one very important part. And that's usually takes a lot of time. That's why this is something that's put in the long-term scenario. Then urban, regional, economical development, right? Like I do think that remote work is probably like the biggest in history chance for like villages and small towns, right? This is literally like possibility to reverse like the movement, because for decades there was a brain drain. Everybody wanted to live in cities because in cities where you can find the work, but in cities also where everybody is, where everything happens. And I come from a very small village. Like literally in my village there are 12 houses in northeastern Poland. And right now, this like so many others, but my village, it's actually probably it will disappear because all young people move to cities. They study, they stay there, right? And then there are no new kids, so nothing is growing, and there are so many towns like that. There is also a bigger question if we do necessarily need to like keep all the villages alive, but certainly we do want to keep the traditions, and we do want to conserve so many of them, right? And then remote workers is actually a big chance for at least part of this population to come back, because with the changes, particularly in housing, right, and housing affordability, like so many cities are becoming so expensive, and the quality of life is actually becoming worse that there is a very growing trend of a lot of people that are interested in moving to a smaller towns or even villages, given that there is the right infrastructure, the right community, and that they can actually not only work there, because if they can work remotely, then obviously they can work there, but they also expect to be able to live there. And the last thing is, again, like work flexibility. So that again has to do with training, and that's on company level. And so that's all from, like, I would say, from AirMat perspective, like the recommendations of what actually has to happen from short, medium, and long-term perspective for us to be able to actually extend remote work movements and have more people working remotely. I wanted to add like maybe a couple of thoughts. My time is running out, but like very briefly. Why people actually move to cities, why they leave villages, and what is actually needed in a village for people to go there, right? Like, obviously, the first things, they must be able to work. So they must find the work, or create the work for themselves, right? Because that's also a possibility. There is a very growing trends of freelancing, and this will grow even more. So don't necessarily they need like proper institutional work from 9 to 5, but more and more people are embracing like this flexible solopreneur freelancing, working for several smaller projects and designing their own career. That's also a possibility. And so with that, technically, you could work in any place that have a digital infrastructure that was mentioned, right? But why more people wouldn't move to a village is because a village very often lacks cultural life, or like events or things going on, right? Because, for instance, someone that is a digital nomad and is looking for a new space have a lot of choices, and so many destinations, so many towns, countries, villages, projects are right now fighting to bring like digital nomads. They literally compete between themselves. So just because someone can go somewhere doesn't mean they will. They need a really good reason, and they must see that, okay, I can work there, but how my life there will look like, right? And there is a very big social proof. So people look if other remote workers or digital nomads already went there, especially the ones they know and follow. So here, again, like promotion of the town, the village, the destination is super, super important, because people must also know that this village exists in the first place and is welcoming digital nomads and have all the right conditions. So even if we create all these conditions, which is first step, then we need to promote that. And that promotion is really, usually it takes a long time, and it has to be done on a continuous basis. So people see that this is actually ongoing thing, not just a pop-up. And that eventually comes to their mind, right? And community, that was mentioned already, very, very important. A lot of people, remote workers, digital nomads, will not even consider going somewhere if there is not an established community already. So that's a little bit of chicken and egg problem, like how they attract the first people if we don't have the community yet. There are also solutions to that, right? How to start and build like very small community first, and then bring new people. But that again, maybe later, maybe on another conversation. So I think that's all from me as of now. If someone would like to stay in touch, you can scan this QR code or connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and I will be around for questions. Thank you.